The sound of Kenneth's palm connecting with Ramona's face echoed through the marble foyer like a gunshot. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Ramona's head had snapped to the side. Her cheek burned. Her ears rang. But it wasn't the pain that froze her. It was the realization that her husband had just struck her to defend another woman. The blonde standing in their doorway, Brooke, took a small step back, her red lips parting in shock. Even she hadn't expected that. Kenneth's hand was still raised, trembling. His eyes went wide as the reality of what he'd done crashed over him. "Ramona, you slapped me." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. She touched her cheek, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. "You slapped your wife. For her." "I didn't mean." "For her." Ramona's gaze lifted slowly to meet his. Something flickered in her eyes, something cold and sharp that made Kenneth's stomach twist. But then, just as quickly, her expression smoothed. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. It wasn't a smile of forgiveness. It was the smile of someone who just made a decision. Kenneth had spent 6 years taking her for granted. 6 years thinking he knew everything about the quiet woman he'd married. 6 years believing her silence meant weakness. What he didn't know about Ramona Hayes was about to destroy him. Hi, my wonderful friends. Welcome to Mr. William Chronicles, where powerful stories reveal life's deepest truths. Before we continue with Ramona's journey, I want you to help me prove something wrong. Some people claim that this channel will not grow, that people will not listen to these stories. But I believe these stories deserve to be heard. Help me show them that these tales matter. So, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now and join this family of story lovers. It helps me keep bringing you these powerful stories. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. You are the heartbeat of this channel, and knowing you're out there keeps these stories alive. 3 hours earlier, Ramona had been standing in front of her bedroom mirror, trying to find the strength to get dressed. Her father had been buried 5 days ago. 5 days since they'd lowered Vincent Hayes into the ground. 5 days since she'd stood at his graveside, numb and hollow, while Kenneth checked his phone beside her. She missed him. The way he used to call her Sweet Pea. The way he'd squeeze her hand twice, his silent way of saying, "I love you." Now the house felt too big, too quiet, and her marriage felt like a stranger living in her skin. Ramona fastened the clasp on her pearl necklace, the one her father had given her on her wedding day. She remembered his words, "Never let anyone make you small, Sweet Pea. You're worth more than you know." She hadn't felt worth much lately. Kenneth appeared in the doorway, adjusting his tie. He looked polished, handsome, distant. "You almost ready?" he asked without looking at her. Almost. He didn't ask how she was feeling, didn't mention her father, didn't notice the redness around her eyes from crying herself to sleep the night before. He just checked his watch and left. Ramona took a breath, steadied herself, and followed. She was halfway down the stairs when the knock came. Kenneth froze at the bottom step. His jaw tightened in a way that told Ramona everything she needed to know. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. Ramona reached the door first and opened it. The woman standing there was young, maybe 26, 27. Blonde hair cascading past her shoulders. A fitted red dress that clung to every curve. And that perfume. Sharp, floral, unmistakable. The same scent Ramona had been smelling on Kenneth's shirts for months. "Can I help you?" Ramona's voice was calm, but her heart was pounding. The blonde smiled, bright, confident. "I'm here for Kenneth. We're carpooling to the meeting." Ramona's fingers tightened on the doorframe. "Carpooling? Yeah. Didn't he tell you?" Kenneth appeared behind Ramona, his hand landing on her shoulder. "Ramona, this is Brooke. She works in acquisitions. We thought it'd be easier to ride together since we're heading to the same place." Ramona turned slowly to face him. "You invited her here? To our home. It's not what you think." "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't stand here and lie to my face, Kenneth." Brooke shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe I should wait in the car." "Maybe you should leave," Ramona said, her tone turning to ice. She stepped closer to Kenneth, lowering her voice. My father just died. And you dare bring her here? Do you have no shame? Kenneth's face flushed. You're overreacting. She's a colleague. A colleague. Ramona laughed bitterly. The same colleague whose pictures I found in your phone last month? The one who wears this exact perfume that I smell on you every time you come home late. Her voice rose. The one you've been sleeping with? Kenneth glanced toward Brooke, then back at Ramona. His face hardened. This isn't the time. Then when is the time, Kenneth? When? Brooke stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Ramona's head whipped toward her. Keep your whore mouth shut when I'm talking to my husband. The words hung in the air like poison. Brooke's face went red. Excuse me. You heard me. Kenneth grabbed Ramona's arm. That's enough. She yanked herself free. Don't you dare touch me. You don't get to talk to her like that, Kenneth said, his voice cold. She's done nothing wrong. Ramona stared at him in disbelief. She's sleeping with my husband. That's not. She's in my house, Kenneth. The house my father helped us buy. And you're defending her. I'm defending basic decency. She's a homewrecker. That's when Kenneth's hand moved. Fast. Hard. Unthinking. The slap cracked across Ramona's face and sent her stumbling backward into the wall. The pain was immediate, sharp, burning. But it was nothing compared to the shock ripping through her chest. She looked up at Kenneth, her hand pressed to her cheek, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't process what had just happened. Kenneth's face went pale. Ramona. She held up a trembling hand, silencing him. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. Empty. You slapped me. For her. I didn't mean to. You slapped your wife. Brooke stood frozen in the doorway, her earlier confidence completely gone. Ramona's lips curved into the faintest smile. Small, eerie, unsettling. Kenneth saw it and felt something twist in his gut. But he pushed the feeling away. Ramona, let me. No. She straightened, smoothing her dress with slow, deliberate movements. You're right. This isn't the time. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Let's go to the meeting. Kenneth blinked. What? The meeting, she repeated, her voice flat and calm. That's why we're all dressed up, isn't it? She walked past them both without another word. Kenneth and Brooke stood in stunned silence. Then Kenneth hurried after her. Ramona, wait. But she was already in her car, engine running, pulling out of the driveway. Brooke turned to Kenneth, confusion written all over her face. What just happened? Kenneth didn't answer. Because for the first time in 6 years, he had no idea who his wife really was. And he was about to find out. The law firm smelled like old leather and expensive cologne. Ramona sat alone on one side of the polished mahogany table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her cheek still throbbed from the slap, but she kept her face blank, unreadable. Across from her, Kenneth sat between Brooke and his business partner, a balding man named Rick who kept glancing nervously at his phone. Brooke had her hand on Kenneth's thigh under the table, a possessive gesture meant to stake her claim. Ramona saw it, said nothing. 3 attorneys shuffled papers at the head of the table. The lead, a silver-haired man named Callahan, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, he began. We're here to finalize the transfer of assets following the passing of Mr. Vincent Hayes. Kenneth leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He'd always thought Ramona's father was comfortable but modest. A rancher with some land. Maybe a decent savings account. Nothing extraordinary. He'd never asked for details. Why would he? Ramona had always been so quiet about money. So humble. He'd assumed there wasn't much to talk about. Callahan opened a thick folder. As outlined in Mr. Hayes's will, all holdings, including the oil production site on Redstone Ridge, are to be transferred to his sole heir. Kenneth barely paid attention. He was mentally drafting an email to a client, planning how to spin the story of why his wife had shown up to this meeting with a handprint on her face. The Redstone Ridge site has been operational for 19 years, Callahan continued. It generates consistent revenue. Current valuation sits at approximately $340 million. The room went silent. Kenneth's head snapped up. I'm sorry, what? Callahan didn't blink. $340 million. The site produces roughly 1,200 barrels per day. Mrs. Hayes is now the sole owner and operator. Brooke's hand slipped off Kenneth's leg. Rick sat forward, eyes wide. Did you just say $340 million? Correct. Kenneth turned slowly to look at Ramona. She sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the table. No surprise. No emotion. Like she'd known all along. Ramona. Kenneth's voice came out strangled. You never told me. You never asked, she said quietly. Callahan flipped to another page. Additionally, there are several corporate entities tied to this estate. Silent partnerships. Investment holdings. Mr. Hayes was quite strategic in his financial planning. Kenneth's pulse quickened. What kind of investments? Various sectors. Energy, technology, real estate. Callahan paused, glancing at Ramona. Mrs. Hayes, would you like me to continue? She nodded once. Callahan adjusted his glasses again. There's one matter that requires immediate attention. Several years ago, Mr. Hayes made significant financial contributions to a tech firm called Helix Dynamics. These were structured as loans through shell companies to avoid direct attribution. Kenneth felt his blood go cold. No. The loans were set up as flexible agreements, Callahan said. Low interest. Long repayment terms. Very favorable conditions for the borrower. Rick turned to Kenneth, confusion written all over his face. Wait, Helix Dynamics? Isn't that? That firm, Callahan continued, is the same one that merged with Mitchell Enterprises 3 years ago. Kenneth couldn't breathe. Mitchell Enterprises was his company. The infusion of capital that allowed the merger to proceed, the money that saved your business during the downturn, came from Mr. Hayes, through the shell companies. The room started spinning. Brooke looked at Kenneth. What is he talking about? Kenneth's mouth opened, but no words came out. Rick leaned forward. Kenneth, did you know about this? Kenneth swallowed hard. I didn't. I swear I didn't know. Callahan pulled out another document. According to the terms, Mrs. Hayes now has full authority over these loans. She can restructure them, extend them, or call them in immediately. Kenneth's eyes shot to Ramona. She was looking at him now, really looking at him, and there was nothing in her gaze. No warmth, no anger, nothing. Ramona, Kenneth's voice cracked. We can talk about this. We can. My father believed in you once, she said softly. He thought you were good for me. He invested in your dreams because he loved me. He did this without telling me, Kenneth said desperately. I had no idea. He did it because he wanted to help us build a life together. Her voice remained steady, calm. He wanted you to succeed. Not for your sake, for mine. Brooke shifted uncomfortably in her seat. But you brought her into my home, Ramona continued, while I'm still mourning him. And when I called her what she is, you hit me. Kenneth felt the weight of every eye in the room. Mrs. Hayes, Callahan said gently, what would you like to do regarding the loans? Ramona stood slowly. She smoothed down her dress, the same careful gesture she'd made after Kenneth slapped her. I want them called in, she said. All of them. Immediately. Kenneth shot to his feet. Ramona, please. Don't do this. The contracts allow for immediate repayment upon request, correct? She looked at Callahan, ignoring Kenneth completely. They do. Then I'm requesting it. Today. Ramona. Kenneth moved around the table toward her. You're upset. I understand. But this will destroy everything we've built. Everything you built, she corrected. With my father's money. Money you didn't even know came from him. Rick stood up, panic flooding his face. Kenneth, if she calls those loans, we're finished. The company can't cover that kind of repayment. Kenneth reached for Ramona's arm. Just give me a chance to explain. She stepped back before he could touch her. Don't. The single word carried so much weight that Kenneth froze. Ramona looked at him, really looked at him, and Kenneth saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. She wasn't angry. She was done. "You taught me something tonight, Kenneth," she said quietly. "Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy." She turned to Callahan. "Draw up the paperwork. I want this finalized by tomorrow." Ramona wait. But she was already walking toward the door. Kenneth started after her, but Callahan stepped into his path. "Mr. Mitchell, I'd advise you to stay and discuss the terms of repayment. Get out of my way." "Kenneth." Rick grabbed his shoulder. "We need to talk about this. Now." Kenneth shook him off, but Ramona was already gone. Brooke stood awkwardly by the table, suddenly realizing she'd backed the wrong horse. Rick sank into his chair, his face pale. "We're ruined. We're completely ruined." Kenneth turned on him. "Shut up. Just shut up and let me think." But there was nothing to think about. The loans were legal. The terms were clear. And Ramona had every right to call them in. He'd built his empire on her father's secret generosity. And he just slapped the one person who held all the cards. Callahan began organizing papers. "Mr. Mitchell, the outstanding balance, including accrued interest, comes to approximately $67 million. You have 30 days to make arrangements." Kenneth felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. $67 million. Rick's voice came out as a whisper. "We don't have that kind of liquidity," Kenneth said. "The company's assets are tied up in." "Then you'll need to liquidate," Callahan said simply. "Or find investors willing to cover the debt." Brooke grabbed her purse. "I should go." Kenneth whirled on her. "You're leaving. This is between you and your wife." She headed for the door. "You're the reason this happened." Kenneth shouted. She stopped, turned, and gave him a look of pure contempt. "No, Kenneth. You're the reason this happened. You hit her. For me. A woman you've been sleeping with for 6 months." She shook her head. "I'm not worth losing $340 million over." And then she was gone too. Kenneth stood alone in the conference room with Rick and the attorneys, the full weight of his mistake crashing down on him. He'd lost everything. And the worst part? He'd done it to himself. Kenneth tried calling Ramona 17 times that night. Every call went straight to voicemail. He sat in his home office, the office in the house her father had helped them buy, staring at his phone like it might suddenly ring with her voice on the other end. It didn't. By morning, the paperwork arrived. A courier delivered it at 7:43 a.m. Kenneth signed for the envelope with shaking hands and opened it at the kitchen table. Notice of loan acceleration and demand for immediate repayment. The words blurred together as he read. $67 million. Due in 30 days. Failure to comply would result in seizure of company assets, including patents, equipment, and real estate holdings. His entire business. Gone. Rick called at 8:15. "Tell me you got a plan," Rick said, his voice tight with panic. Kenneth rubbed his face. He hadn't slept. "I'm working on it." "Working on it?" "Kenneth, we have 30 days to come up with $67 million. Our investors are already spooked. If word gets out that we're this leveraged..." "It won't get out. It's already out." Rick's voice cracked. "I got 3 calls this morning. 3. People are asking questions. They want to know if the company's stable." Kenneth's grip tightened on the phone. "What did you tell them?" "What could I tell them? I didn't even know we owed this kind of money until yesterday." "Neither did I," Kenneth wanted to say. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He'd built his success on a foundation he didn't even know existed. "Just give me time," Kenneth said. "I'll fix this." "How?" "I'll talk to Ramona. I'll make her understand." Rick laughed bitterly. "You slapped her, Kenneth. In front of witnesses. You think she's going to just forgive that?" Kenneth ended the call. He tried Ramona again. Voicemail. He sent a text. "Please. Just let me explain." No response. Another text. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." Nothing. "Ramona, please. We can work this out." The silence was deafening. By day 3, the investors started pulling out. One by one, they called Rick with polite excuses. Market conditions. Portfolio rebalancing. Personal reasons. But Kenneth knew the truth. They'd heard about the loans. About Ramona. About the slap. And they wanted nothing to do with a sinking ship. Kenneth drove to Ramona's sister's house on day 5. He knew she sometimes stayed there when she needed space. Her sister answered the door, a tall woman named Claire with Ramona's same dark eyes. "She doesn't want to see you," Claire said flatly. "I just need 5 minutes." "You hit her." The words landed like a punch. I know, and You hit my sister while she was grieving our father." Claire's voice was cold, hard. "And you did it to defend the woman you've been cheating with." "It was a mistake." "Damn right it was." Claire started to close the door. Kenneth stuck his foot in the frame. "Please, just tell her I need to talk to her. Tell her I'm sorry. She knows you're sorry. You're always sorry, Kenneth. Sorry you forgot her birthday. Sorry you missed her father's chemotherapy appointments. Sorry you've been lying to her for months." Claire's eyes blazed. "But sorry doesn't mean anything when you keep doing the same thing. This is different. You're right. This time you put your hands on her. So no, I won't tell her anything. And if you show up here again, I'm calling the police." The door slammed in his face. Kenneth stood on the porch, his world collapsing around him. By day 10, the company was bleeding money. Clients were canceling contracts. Partners were backing out of deals. The stock price, what little public offering they had, tanked. Rick came to Kenneth's office with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "We're done," Rick said, pouring them both a drink. "I talked to 3 different banks. None of them will touch us. We're too high risk." Kenneth downed his glass in one gulp. "There has to be something." "There isn't." Rick refilled both glasses. "Even if we liquidate everything, we'll still come up short. And the moment we start selling assets, the whole industry will know we're desperate." "So what do?" Rick looked at him. Really looked at him. "We file for bankruptcy. Cut our losses. Try to salvage what we can." Kenneth's hands clenched into fists. "No, Kenneth." "I said no." He stood, pacing the office. "I built this company from nothing. I'm not just going to let it die." "You built it from her father's money," Rick said quietly. "Money you didn't even know you had." The truth of it stung. Kenneth had spent years thinking he was self-made. A success story. Proof that hard work and vision could overcome anything. But it had all been a lie. Every victory, every milestone, every moment of pride, built on the generosity of a man who'd loved his daughter enough to secretly fund her husband's dreams. And Kenneth had repaid that love by hitting her. Brooke stopped returning his calls on day 12. He tried reaching out to her a few times, not because he wanted her back, but because he needed someone. Anyone. But her number went straight to voicemail too. Then he saw her Instagram story. She was in Miami, poolside at some luxury resort, cocktail in hand, smiling at the camera with a new guy, some finance bro with perfect teeth and a Rolex. The caption read, "New chapter, new energy." Kenneth stared at the photo until his eyes burned. She'd moved on in less than 2 weeks. Like he'd never mattered at all. By day 15, Kenneth's lawyer delivered the news he'd been dreading. "The loans are ironclad," the lawyer said, sliding documents across the desk. "Mrs. Hayes has every legal right to call them in. And given the circumstances, no judge is going to side with you." "What circumstances?" The lawyer gave him a pointed look. "You assaulted your wife, Kenneth, in front of witnesses, one of whom works at the law firm handling the estate." Kenneth's stomach dropped. "Brooke," she gave a statement, "said you struck Mrs. Hayes during an argument about your relationship, that you've been having an affair for months. That has nothing to do with the loans." "It has everything to do with the loans. It shows motive. It shows that Mrs. Hayes has legitimate reasons to protect her assets from you." The lawyer leaned back. "If this goes to court, you'll lose. And you'll lose publicly." Kenneth felt the walls closing in. "What are my options? Pay the money, or declare bankruptcy, and hope she doesn't pursue further damages." "Further damages?" "She could sue you personally, for emotional distress, for fraud, if she can prove you knowingly benefited from her father's investments without disclosure. There's a long list of potential claims." Kenneth's head dropped into his hands. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, gone. On day 16, Kenneth sat alone in his house. Ramona's things were still there, her books on the shelf, her coffee mug in the cabinet, her perfume on the bathroom counter. But she was gone. He picked up his phone one more time, scrolled to her name. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then he saw his reflection in the darkened screen. Tired eyes, hollow cheeks, the face of a man who destroyed everything that mattered. He put the phone down. What could he possibly say that would change anything? She'd spent years loving him quietly, supporting him, standing beside him, and he'd taken it all for granted. He'd assumed her silence meant she had nothing to offer, that her calm demeanor meant she had no power. He'd been wrong about everything. Ramona Hayes wasn't weak. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to show him exactly who she was. And now, with 30 days ticking down and no way to pay what he owed, Kenneth finally understood. He hadn't just lost his business. He'd lost the only person who'd ever truly believed in him. And there was no coming back from that. The bankruptcy filing made the local business news on day 23. Kenneth watched the segment from his nearly empty office. Most of his staff had already quit. The ones who stayed did so only because they couldn't find other jobs fast enough. Mitchell Enterprises, once a rising star in the tech sector, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, the news anchor said. Sources close to the company's cite insurmountable debt and the sudden calling in of major loans as the primary factors. Kenneth turned off the TV. Rick appeared in the doorway, a cardboard box in his hands. "That's the last of my stuff." Kenneth didn't look at him. "You're really leaving?" "There's nothing left to stay for." Rick set the box down. "I got an offer from a firm in Denver. I start next month." "Good for you." "Kenneth, I mean it. Get out while you can." Rick hesitated. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something else. Maybe apologize. Maybe offer comfort. But what was there to say? "Take care of yourself," Rick said finally. Then he was gone. Kenneth sat alone in the office until the sun went down. The building was quiet now. No phones ringing. No meetings. No deals. Just silence. He went home to an empty house. Ramona's sister had come by 2 weeks ago with movers. They'd taken everything, her clothes, her books, her paintings, even the coffee maker she'd bought because Kenneth never remembered to clean the old one. Now the house felt like a museum, beautiful and hollow. Kenneth poured himself a drink and sat on the couch. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should check your email." He frowned, opened his laptop, and clicked on the new message. It was from Brooke. No subject line. Just a link to a gossip blog. Kenneth's hands went cold as he clicked it. The headline read, "Local businessman's affair exposed. Wife reclaims millions." Below, it was a photo. Kenneth and Brooke at a restaurant. His hand on her thigh. Her lips against his ear. The article detailed everything. The affair. The slap. The loans. Ramona's inheritance. But the worst part was the quote at the end. He thought he was untouchable, an anonymous source said. He thought she'd just take it. He was wrong. Kenneth's stomach twisted. The source was Brooke. She'd sold him out for a payout from some tabloid blogger. He called her immediately. She answered on the third ring. "I was wondering when you'd see it." "What the hell is this?" "Insurance." Her voice was cold. Matter of fact. "You're going down, Kenneth. And I'm not going down with you." "You told them everything." "I told them the truth. That you're a cheater and a liar who hit his wife. I gave you everything." Brooke laughed. "You gave me nothing. Dinners. Hotels. Promises you never kept. You told me you were leaving her. That we'd be together." Her voice hardened. "But you were never going to leave her, were you? Not when you thought she was just some quiet little housewife with nothing to offer." "That's not." "Save it. I don't care anymore." She paused. "Oh, and Kenneth? I'm keeping the necklace you gave me. Consider it severance." The line went dead. Kenneth threw his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. By day 28, the house was in foreclosure. Kenneth had tried everything. Liquidating assets. Selling personal property. Even begging former colleagues for loans. No one would help him. His reputation was destroyed. The affair, the slap, the bankruptcy. It was all anyone talked about. He'd become a cautionary tale. The movers came on a gray Tuesday morning. They packed up what little remained: furniture, dishes, a few boxes of files. Kenneth stood in the empty living room, staring at the walls. This was the house where he'd promised Ramona they'd build a life together, where they'd hosted dinners and celebrated holidays, where her father had sat in that very spot, telling stories about Ramona as a little girl. Now it was gone. Everything was gone. The apartment Kenneth moved into was a studio on the east side of town. Cramped, dingy, the kind of place he would have never looked at twice before. But it was all he could afford now. He unpacked his single suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed. His phone, a cheap replacement, buzzed. A job offer. Entry-level sales position at a mid-size firm. The salary was a fraction of what he used to make. But he had no choice. He accepted it. 3 months after the bankruptcy, Kenneth ran into someone he used to know. A former client named Dave. They'd done business together years ago, back when Kenneth was still climbing. Dave barely recognized him. "Kenneth? Man, you look." Dave stopped himself. "You doing okay?" Kenneth forced a smile. "Yeah, just transitioning. I heard about the company. That's rough." "It happens." Dave shifted awkwardly. "Listen, I'd love to catch up, but I'm actually running late." "No problem. Good seeing you." Dave hurried away like Kenneth's failure might be contagious. Kenneth watched him go, then kept walking. That's what his life was now. Awkward encounters, pitying looks, people crossing the street to avoid him. He'd become invisible. One night, Kenneth found himself scrolling through old photos on his laptop. Pictures of him and Ramona. Their wedding day. A vacation to Colorado. A quiet dinner at home. In every photo, she was smiling. But now, looking back, he could see it. The smile never quite reached her eyes. She'd been unhappy for years, and he'd never noticed. He'd been too busy chasing success, building his empire, proving himself to people who didn't matter. And he'd ignored the one person who did. Kenneth clicked on a video. Their 5th anniversary. Ramona had set up the camera and made a toast. "To 5 years," she'd said, raising her glass. "And to many more." Kenneth had barely looked up from his phone. In the video, he saw Ramona's smile falter. Just for a second. Then she'd taken a sip of wine and changed the subject. He closed the laptop. On a cold evening in late autumn, Kenneth was walking home from work when he saw her. Ramona. She was standing outside a cafe, laughing at something someone said. The someone was a man. Tall. Well-dressed. Handsome. Kenneth froze. The man handed Ramona a coffee, and she smiled, really smiled, in a way Kenneth hadn't seen in years. Then the man leaned down and kissed her. Softly. Gently. Like she was something precious. Kenneth's chest tightened. She looked happy. Radiant. Alive. The man said something that made her laugh again, and they walked off together, hands intertwined. Kenneth stood on the sidewalk, watching them disappear around the corner. She'd moved on, and he was still standing in the wreckage of everything he'd destroyed. That night, Kenneth sat alone in his apartment. He thought about calling her, apologizing, begging for another chance. But what would he even say? "I'm sorry I hit you. I'm sorry I cheated. I'm sorry I took you for granted for 6 years." Sorry didn't mean anything anymore. He'd lost her. Lost the business. Lost everything. And the worst part? He'd done it all to himself. Kenneth looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. He barely recognized the man staring back. Tired. Broken. Haunted. This was who he'd become. And somewhere across town, Ramona was laughing with someone who actually deserved her. Someone who saw her worth. Someone who would never raise a hand to her. Kenneth turned off the light and went to bed. But sleep didn't come. It never did anymore. All he had now was the memory of her smile, the small, unsettling smile she'd given him the night he slapped her. The smile that had changed everything. He'd thought it was a sign of weakness. He'd been wrong. It was the smile of someone who'd finally decided she was done being disrespected. And now Kenneth understood. Real power didn't shout. It just stopped allowing itself to be hurt. That if you're still watching and feeling that satisfaction right now, tap that like button. You know she deserved this moment. Show this story some love with a like and comment, "I see you, Ramona," if you're rooting for her. 2 years changed everything. Ramona stood in front of the mirror in her new home, a modest but beautiful house on the outskirts of San Antonio. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the hardwood floors. She barely recognized herself, not because she looked different, but because she felt different. The woman staring back at her had learned to breathe again. After the divorce was finalized, Ramona had disappeared. No social media, no public appearances, no explanations. She'd sold the estate, donated half the money to cancer research in her father's name, and kept the rest for herself. Then she'd started over. Therapy helped. Twice a week at first, then once a week, then twice a month. Dr. Morrison, a kind woman in her 60s, had taught Ramona something crucial. "You're not broken," Dr. Morrison had said during their 3rd session. "You're healing. And healing isn't linear." Ramona had cried that day. Really cried. For the first time since her father's funeral. And slowly, piece by piece, she'd started putting herself back together. She read books her father had recommended years ago, took early morning walks through the park, joined a painting class even though she had no talent for it. She learned to be alone without being lonely. And for the first time in years, she felt free. The charity gala wasn't her idea. Claire had practically dragged her there. "You can't hide forever," Claire had said, holding up a dress. "Dad would want you to live, not just exist." So Ramona went. The event was held at a historic hotel downtown. String lights, live music, wealthy donors mingling over champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Ramona nursed a glass of wine in the corner, counting down the minutes until she could politely leave. Then someone spoke beside her. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." She turned. The man standing there was tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He wore a simple suit, nothing flashy, and held a glass of sparkling water instead of alcohol. "That obvious?" Ramona asked. "Only to someone who feels the same way." He extended his hand. "Garrett Finch." Ramona Hayes. His handshake was warm, firm, but not aggressive. "So what brings you here, Ramona Hayes?" "My sister. She thinks I need to get out more." Garrett laughed. "Same. My brother dragged me here. Said I work too much." "Do you?" "Probably." He smiled. "I'm a veterinarian. I run a clinic on the south side. Animals don't really care about work-life balance." Ramona found herself smiling back. "That sounds nice, actually. Rewarding." "It is. Most days." He paused. "What do you do?" "Right now? I'm figuring that out." Garrett didn't press. Didn't ask follow-up questions. Just nodded like he understood. "That's fair," he said. "Sometimes figuring it out is the hardest part." They talked for an hour. About books. About traveling. About their families. Garrett told her about growing up on a farm in Oklahoma. How he'd wanted to be a vet since he was 8 years old and found an injured barn owl. Ramona told him about her father. How he used to take her fishing every Sunday. How she still missed the sound of his laugh. Garrett listened. Really listened. Not just waiting for his turn to talk. And when the gala ended, he asked if he could see her again. "Coffee," he suggested. "No pressure. Just coffee." Ramona hesitated. Then she said yes. Their first date was simple. A cafe near the river. Morning sunlight. The smell of fresh pastries. Garrett ordered black coffee. Ramona got a latte. They talked for 3 hours. He asked her questions. About her childhood. Her dreams. What made her laugh. He didn't ask about her past relationships. Didn't pry into why she seemed cautious. He just wanted to know her. And Ramona realized something startling. She wanted to be known. They took it slow. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks. Walks turned into weekends spent exploring small towns and antique shops. Garrett never rushed her. never pushed for more than she was ready to give. When he held her hand for the first time, he asked first, "Is this okay?" Ramona looked down at their fingers intertwined and felt something warm bloom in her chest. Yes. Their first kiss happened on a quiet evening by the river. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They'd been sitting on a bench, watching the water flow. Garrett turned to her. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What are you afraid of?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "You're careful, guarded." "Which is fine, I'm not complaining. I just want to understand." Ramona looked away. "I was married before. I figured. It didn't end well." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Did he hurt you?" She nodded. Garrett's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. "I'm not him." "I know. Do you?" Ramona met his eyes. "I'm trying to." Garrett reached for her hand. "Then let me prove it, however long it takes." And then he kissed her. Soft, patient, like he had all the time in the world. Ramona kissed him back and felt something inside her finally let go. 6 months later, Garrett said he loved her. They were cooking dinner at his place, or trying to. Ramona had accidentally burned the garlic bread, and Garrett was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "I told you to set a timer," he said, waving away the smoke. "I did set a timer." "For how long?" 30 seconds. Ramona threw a dish towel at him. Garrett caught it, still grinning. Then his expression softened. "I love you," he said. Ramona froze. "What?" "I love you. I love that you burn garlic bread. I love that you hum when you're concentrating. I love that you're strong and kind and real." He stepped closer. "I love you, Ramona." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to say it back," Garrett added quickly. "I just needed you to know." But Ramona shook her head. "I love you too." And she meant it. A year and a half after they met, Garrett proposed. It wasn't elaborate. No flash mob. No photographer hiding in the bushes. Just the two of them on a quiet evening by the river. The same spot where they'd had their first kiss. Garrett got down on one knee, pulled out a simple ring, and asked the most important question of his life. "Ramona Hayes, will you marry me?" Ramona didn't hesitate. "Yes." Garrett slipped the ring on her finger, stood, and pulled her into his arms. She felt safe, cherished, loved. Everything Kenneth had never made her feel. Across town, Kenneth saw the engagement announcement in the newspaper. He'd been eating breakfast at a diner when he spotted it. A small photo in the lifestyle section. Ramona Hayes and Garrett Finch announce engagement. Kenneth's fork clattered onto his plate. She looked radiant in the photo. Happy, alive. The man beside her, Garrett, had his arm around her waist, looking at her like she hung the moon. Kenneth stared at the photo until the words blurred. He thought about reaching out, sending a letter, apologizing one more time. But what would that accomplish? She'd moved on, found someone who treated her the way she deserved. And Kenneth was still living in a cramped apartment, working a job he hated, haunted by the worst decision of his life. He folded the newspaper, paid his bill, and left. Outside, the sun was shining. People were laughing, going about their lives. And Kenneth walked alone through the streets, carrying the weight of his regrets. Ramona didn't think about Kenneth anymore. Not with anger, not with bitterness. She'd let go of all of it, because holding on to pain only gave him power. And she'd taken her power back the night he slapped her. Now standing in Garrett's kitchen, watching him make terrible pancakes while singing off-key, Ramona smiled. This was what love looked like. Respect, partnership, kindness. Not grand gestures or empty promises. Just showing up. Every single day. Garrett turned and caught her staring. "What?" "Nothing." She walked over and kissed him. "I'm just happy." "Good." He grinned. "Because you're stuck with me now. I can live with that." And for the first time in years, Ramona meant it. She'd survived the worst. And now she was living her best. Kenneth saw her on a Tuesday afternoon. He was leaving the grocery store, bags in hand, when he spotted them across the street. Ramona and Garrett, standing outside a cafe, laughing at something on his phone. Kenneth froze. She looked different. Her hair was longer. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, nothing fancy. But there was something about her that made her glow. She looked free. Garrett said something that made her throw her head back and laugh. A real laugh, the kind Kenneth hadn't heard from her in years. Then Garrett leaned down and kissed her forehead. The gesture was so simple, so tender. Kenneth's chest tightened. He wanted to walk over, to say something, to apologize one more time. But his feet wouldn't move. What could he possibly say that would matter now? Ramona glanced up, and for a split second, their eyes met. Kenneth's breath caught. She saw him. He was sure of it. But her expression didn't change. No anger. No pain. No recognition. She just looked at him like he was a stranger. Then she turned back to Garrett, slipped her hand into his, and walked away. Kenneth stood there, watching them disappear down the street. And that's when it hit him. She'd moved on. Not just from the marriage. Not just from the hurt. From him entirely. He didn't matter to her anymore. Kenneth walked to his car and sat in the driver's seat, staring at nothing. 2 years ago, he'd had everything. A successful company. A beautiful home. A wife who loved him. And he'd thrown it all away for what? A meaningless affair. An ego that needed stroking. The illusion of power. Now he had nothing. No business. No house. No Ramona. Just a cramped apartment and a job that barely paid the bills. He'd lost everything that mattered. And the worst part? He'd done it to himself. Ramona's wedding day arrived on a crisp Saturday in October. The ceremony was small. Just close friends and family. Held in a garden overlooking the river. Claire stood beside her as maid of honor, tears streaming down her face. "You look beautiful," Claire whispered. Ramona smiled. "I feel beautiful." And she did. The dress was simple. White lace. Elegant. Nothing extravagant. But it was hers. Chosen by her. For a man who saw her worth. Garrett stood at the altar. His eyes locked on her as she walked down the aisle. He looked nervous. Happy. Overwhelmed. When she reached him, he took her hands. "You're stunning," he whispered. "You're not so bad yourself." The officiant began the ceremony, but Ramona barely heard the words. All she could focus on was Garrett. The way he looked at her. The way his hands trembled slightly in hers. This was real. This was love. "Do you, Ramona Hayes, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Ramona's voice was steady. Strong. "I do." "And do you, Garrett Finch, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Garrett grinned. "Absolutely." Laughter rippled through the small crowd. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Garrett pulled Ramona close and kissed her. The crowd erupted in applause. And Ramona felt something settle deep in her chest. Peace. Kenneth heard about the wedding from a mutual acquaintance. He was at a bar, somewhere he spent most evenings now, when someone mentioned it. "Did you hear Ramona Hayes got married?" Kenneth's hand tightened around his glass. "Yeah, to some vet. Big fancy wedding." She looked really happy. Kenneth downed his drink and ordered another. He thought about showing up, just to see her one last time. But what would that accomplish? She'd made her choice. And it wasn't him. Months passed. Kenneth's life became a routine. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. He stopped checking her social media. Stopped asking about her. What was the point? She was living her life. And he was stuck in his. One night, he found himself back at the old house. It had been sold to a young couple. They'd repainted the shutters. Added a swing to the front porch. It looked happy. Kenneth sat in his car across the street, staring at the windows. He could see them inside. The husband and wife. Laughing. Dancing in the kitchen. The way he and Ramona used to. Or the way they should have. Kenneth's phone buzzed. A text from a sponsor. He'd been attending meetings for 6 months now, trying to deal with the drinking. "How are you doing tonight?" Kenneth typed back, "I'm okay." It was a lie, but it was easier than the truth. Ramona didn't think about Kenneth anymore. Not with hatred. Not with regret. She'd simply let him go. Some nights, Garrett would ask about her past. Do you ever miss it? The money? The lifestyle? Ramona would shake her head. I miss my father. But the rest? No. Not even a little. Not even a little. Because she'd learned something important. Wealth without respect meant nothing. Success without love was hollow. And silence wasn't weakness. It was knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. 3 years after the divorce, Ramona ran into Kenneth one last time. She was at the farmer's market with Garrett, picking out fresh vegetables for dinner. Kenneth was standing by a fruit stand, looking tired and older than she remembered. Their eyes met. This time, Ramona didn't look away. She walked over. Kenneth's eyes widened. Ramona, Kenneth. An awkward silence hung between them. You look good, he said finally. Thank you. So do you. It was a kind lie. I heard you got married. Congratulations. Thank you. Another silence. Ramona, Kenneth's voice cracked. I'm sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know. Ramona nodded slowly. I know you are. I was an idiot. I took you for granted. I hurt you in ways I can't ever fix. You did. Kenneth looked down. I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed to say it. Ramona studied him for a moment. The man who'd once seemed so powerful now looked broken, lost. And she felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No pain. Just indifference. I hope you find peace, Kenneth, she said gently. I really do. Then she turned and walked back to Garrett. Kenneth watched her go, tears stinging his eyes. She'd forgiven him. Not with words. Not with reconciliation. But by moving on so completely that he no longer had the power to hurt her. That night, Ramona and Garrett sat on their porch, watching the sunset. Was that him? Garrett asked quietly. Yeah. You okay? Ramona leaned into him. I'm perfect. And she meant it. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. People will mistake your silence for weakness. Your patience for powerlessness. Your kindness for naivety. But real strength doesn't announce itself. It simply refuses to be disrespected. Ramona had been silent for years. But she'd never been weak. She'd been waiting. And when the moment came, she'd shown Kenneth exactly who she was. Not with anger. Not with revenge. But by walking away and building a life so beautiful that he could only watch from the outside. They saw her silence as surrender. They were wrong. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like. It really helps the channel grow. And drop a comment telling us where you are watching from and your favorite moment in the story. And subscribe to Mr. William Chronicles so you don't miss stories like this. We tell stories about people who turned their pain into power. And trust me, there are more coming. See you in the next one.